You're looking at an early prototype of Uncharted 4, a version that no longer exists. This build was scrapped after Naughty Dog went one of the most dramatic internal shakeups in its history. In April of 2014, Amy Hennig, who was the original creator of Uncharted and led creative vision of every single Uncharted game up until Uncharted 4, was in the midst of a massive power struggle within Naughty Dog, of which the victor would set the course of what type of developer Naughty Dog would evolve into the modern era. What began as a continuation of Nathan Drake's story ended up reshaping the identity of one of gaming's most beloved studios. Today, I will go over the development process of Uncharted 4 and show how the power struggle ultimately decided not only Naughty Dog's identity, but also wielded immense influence over the direction of the entire gaming industry. Before diving into the development of Uncharted 4, we have to take a look at how Naughty Dog was structured before they began working on Uncharted 4. In 2009, Naughty Dog split into two separate teams. One team was working on Uncharted 3, while the other team, led by Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley, started working on a brand new IP, The Last of Us. The dual team model, while enabling high volume output, set the stage for creative conflicts and resource imbalances. Following the successful launch of Uncharted 3, the team responsible for that game, under the creative direction of Amy Hennig and game director Justin Richmond, transitioned into preliminary work on Uncharted 4. Creative control for the Uncharted series remained with Amy Hennig, who was a key architect of the franchise's narrative and gameplay. During the initial conceptual phase, Hennig wanted Uncharted 4 to have a focus on enhanced mobility like the grappling hook, new traversal mechanics like shooting cliffs to create handholds for climbing, and a completely different story, which I'll get into shortly. While Uncharted 3 was a successful release, The Last of Us garnered critical acclaim and consumed significant studio attention. After the release of Uncharted 3, the studio's two teams split was starting to conjoin back together. Resources were being pulled away in droves from the Uncharted team as Naughty Dog began focusing on getting The Last of Us out the door. The internal competition for resources and talent created an environment where The Last of Us development and subsequent release in 2013 inadvertently drew focus and resources away from Uncharted 4's development, impacting the initial development trajectory. With Naughty Dog focusing their studio on The Last of Us, Uncharted 4's development was very limited, as they simply didn't have enough resources to go through a proper pre-production phase. Uncharted 4's real development started to ramp up after The Last of Us shipped, with the Uncharted team finally returning to Hennig in mid to late 2013. From November of 2011 to March of 2014, Amy Hennig and her teams actively developed preliminary concepts and gameplay ideas for Uncharted 4. Again, while these ideas were made, they couldn't really flesh them out due to resources being pulled into The Last of Us. But their original vision for evolving gameplay mechanics included the inclusion of vehicles and a grappling hook. The team also explored a unique combat twist, considering a period where Nathan Drake would primarily rely on melee combat, aiming to showcase a different facet of his character. They tinkered with prototypes of new traversal mechanics such as slide mechanic and the ability for Drake to shoot cliff walls to create handholds for climbing. A cornerstone of Hennig's narrative was the introduction of Nathan Drake's old partner, Sam. Hennig's original concept for Sam was not as Nathan's blood brother, but rather a figure who would be one of the main villains, who was bitter towards Nathan for being left behind during a Panamanian prison escape. Hennig described her Sam as an antagonistic force in Drake's life that he had to reconcile with, complicated by their past rather than a classic antagonist. This version aimed to explore deeper themes of trust, abandonment, and the nature of family through the lens of Nate creating his own identity. Her story would have delved more into Nathan's mother's research and her death, which was largely glossed over in the final game. Hennig's vision did not include a character named Nadine Ross or the childhood flashbacks that became central to the final game. As development was officially in full force by summer of 2013, Hennig and her team were already falling behind. The game was originally supposed to be released in 2015, but the deadline was quickly approaching and the team was still in the prototype phase of development. The game was failing and it was very far behind. But despite the catastrophic setbacks, Naughty Dog publicly announced that they were working on the next Uncharted game with a teaser trailer which was released in late 2013. They didn't tie an official release date to the game yet, but this is what the game looked like around this date. Seeing this set the higher-ups at Naughty Dog into high alert. Something had to be done and it had to be course corrected fast. But before we dive into what the higher-ups did, I just want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark is a lightweight, easy-to-use VPN that helps keep your browsing private and free from the dangers of public internet use. Surfshark is built from the ground up to not only protect your internet traffic, but also comes with a built-in ad blocker to stop trackers from harvesting your data. With over 3,000 servers in over 100 countries, it's incredibly easy to protect where you're accessing the internet from by easily switching over to a different country. This also allows you to watch shows and movies from streaming services that may not be available in your country. For gaming, Surfshark has pledged to not having any bandwidth limitations, so gaming while using Surfshark is fast and secure. But the best part of Surfshark is that you only need one account to access Surfshark across all of your devices. It's also available risk-free too, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. There's no risk to giving the service a try and seeing how it fits into your daily routine, whether that's streaming, browsing, or researching game development history videos, like this one. You can go to the link below or use code POUNDER at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. And a quick thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. In March of 2014, a pivotal moment in the development of Uncharted 4 was about to happen. Amy Hennig abruptly exited Naughty Dog with no context to her departure. Her departure was followed by that of game director Justin Richmond and several other long-standing veterans of the studio. Here was the creative director of one of PlayStation's most successful franchises, leaving in the middle of development of what would become Uncharted 4. So, what happened here? Well, the official statement from both Hennig and Sony is that there was creative differences in the project. Hennig is bounded by a non-disclosure agreement, so she can't tell us the exact reasons why she left, nor do I think we'll ever know. But the unofficial story, however, gives us some clues and helps paint a bigger picture. In 2014, IGN reported that Hennig was forced out by Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley based on verified sources. Naughty Dog immediately refuted these claims by saying this: "We feel it's necessary to clear up a very important point that was unprofessionally misreported when the story broke," Evan Walls and Christopher Ballistra, the studio's co-presidents, said in a joint statement on Naughty Dog's site. Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann were not involved in what transpired. After the statement, IGN retracted what they said about the power struggles occurring within Naughty Dog. But if there truly wasn't a mix-up of long-time leadership, then it's awfully suspicious for them not to reveal the true reason to us. Additionally, Jason Schreier, who is extremely reputable about behind the scenes of video games, corroborated the reporting that Hennig was out due to a power struggle. Coupled with the fact that Druckmann and Straley had become rising stars after the critical and commercial success of The Last of Us, the reporting seems more and more accurate. While we don't know the real reason why Amy Hennig, the mother of the Uncharted franchise, abruptly left the project, we do know who took over the project. Can you guess who is in charge of the game's development now? Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley were brought on to the project immediately following Amy's departure. A defining decision made upon their arrival was to scrap 100% of the story and a significant portion of the work that had been completed under Hennig's direction. According to Nolan North, Nathan Drake's voice actor, almost 8 months of work was scrapped and rewritten under the new direction. Druckmann and Straley effectively restarted the game's narrative and much of its gameplay from scratch. The decision to scrap 8 months worth of work and implement a 100% change in the story represented an immense financial and creative cost. For a AAA title, this level of rework is highly unusual and inherently risky. The complete creative overhaul and the unprecedented decision to discard a significant portion of development content directly caused Uncharted 4 to be delayed from its initial informal 2015 target to a confirmed 2016 release window. So, now that the original project was starting over from scratch, what did the new leads actually change from Amy's original vision? And how did they rebuild the game with a completely new narrative and design? The decision to effectively restart development in 2014 meant that Druckmann and Strelly had less than 2 years to complete a game that had already been through the conceptual phase and the prototype phase. The game was originally targeting a 2015 release, but was thankfully pushed back to 2016 once the shakeup occurred. Sony officially revealed Uncharted 4 alongside a release year in E3 of 2014, just a month after the internal struggle. The new creative direction from Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley aimed for Uncharted 4 to be the definitive final chapter for Nathan Drake, adopting a darker tone and a more character-centric conclusion for the series. This drastically compressed the timeline, coupled with the imperative to meet numerous deadlines, forced the studio into a massive rush and overdrive in production, as 70 to 80% of the existing work was scrapped, including levels, writing, and voice acting. Only certain elements remained, like the Madagascar chase scene and some basic character concepts. They restarted the game with a completely new tone. Like I said before, it was darker, more introspective, and character-driven in the style of The Last of Us. This reboot meant they had to build a brand new AAA game in about 18 months, which is unheard of in the AAA space, even at the time. Pressure from Sony to release the game fast played a key factor in the strict timeline here as well. Given these requirements, there's only one solution that the higher-ups saw as the way forward, and unfortunately, it's a solution that's been normalized across the entire gaming industry. The shift in leadership and the complete reboot of the game's narrative had massive ripple effects across the studio, particularly in how work was conducted. With less than 2 years to build a AAA title from scratch, Naughty Dog entered what employees later described as a brutal period of crunch culture. Developers worked long hours, weekends, and holidays just to keep the project on track. Some insiders reported 60 to 80-hour work weeks becoming the norm, with mounting pressure from Sony to deliver on time. While Naughty Dog had consistently produced critically acclaimed games, it has also gained a notoriety for its intense work environment. Uncharted 4 and the development of the game was no exception. The culture of crunch would also waterfall over and continue to snowball into their next project, The Last of Us Part 2, which I have a video about if you're interested in. A quote from a developer who worked on Uncharted 4 really highlights how chaotic the reboot of the game was. A normal work week for us was 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 6 days a week, and we didn't really have any choice about it. Sometimes we'd stay until midnight or 1 a.m., and at the end of Uncharted 4, we started doing 7-day work weeks for a little while, and even did some 24-hour shifts where we'd come in at 10 a.m. and leave at 10 a.m. the next day. I didn't really have life outside of work for 8 to 9 months during the big crunch. Uncharted 4's reboot suffered from a chaotic production cycle where features were being built and tested simultaneously with level design. The need to finalize systems like the grappling hook, sliding, and open-ended exploration in Madagascar, for example, put enormous strain on designers and QA alike. It's worth noting that these gameplay features were holdovers from Hennig's original vision, but had to be reintegrated into an entirely new story framework. While the final product was loved by critics and fans, many team members walked away from the project completely burnt out. In fact, several key developers like designers left the studio after the game's release, citing the unsustainable pace of work. The situation with Uncharted 4 ignited broader discussions within the games industry about the toll of crunch and the lack of protections for game workers, an issue still mostly unresolved across much of AAA development. Despite the internal struggle and controversial development cycle, Uncharted 4 launched in May 2016 to critical acclaim, winning multiple Game of the Year awards and selling over 15 million copies. It is widely regarded as one of the finest entries in the franchise, and perhaps the strongest narrative closure in any PlayStation first-party series. But the cost of achieving that success fundamentally changed Naughty Dog. Following Uncharted 4, Bruce Straley left the studio in 2017, citing burnout and the need to reclaim his creativity outside of the demands of AAA games. Neil Druckmann, meanwhile, became the face of Naughty Dog, elevated to vice president and now serving as studio head of Naughty Dog. He went on to spearhead The Last of Us Part 2, a game that would continue to stir enormous disclosures around storytelling in games and once again sparks of criticisms against crunch. Internally, Naughty Dog has made efforts to address its reputation for crunch, publicly stating that it's working on improving workflows and fostering a healthy development environment. However, reports still continue to surface about long hours and intense production cycles, raising questions about how sustainable their creative model truly is. What's clear is that the events surrounding Uncharted 4's development marked a pivotal transformation for Naughty Dog. The studio went from being a powerhouse of action-adventure games to one of the most narratively ambitious and at times divisive developers in the entire industry. And it all began with a power struggle that tore one of gaming's most iconic franchises apart, only to rebuild it from the ashes in less than 2 years.